Welcome to our Hong Kong Brief program. Today, we have some riveting news to discuss. Firstly, Hong Kong's weather forecaster has announced the potential issuance of the number 1 typhoon signal if a tropical depression develops in the South China Sea. Expect showers, thunderstorms, and squalls on Friday and Saturday. Secondly, the Hong Kong stock market continues its losing streak, with the Hang Seng Index dropping 0.7% amid concerns over rising U.S. Treasury yields and China's property market. Lastly, in a landmark subversion trial, 14 pro-democracy activists have been found guilty, with potential sentences ranging from 3 years to life. This case has drawn international criticism and highlights the ongoing political tensions in the city. Please stay tuned for more detailed coverage of these stories. South China Morning Post: Hong Kong's weather forecaster has issued a warning that it may activate the number 1 typhoon signal if a tropical depression forms later on Thursday, marking the first such alert of the year. The Hong Kong Observatory explained that a broad area of low pressure has developed in the central to northern part of the South China Sea, though it remains loosely organized. If this area intensifies into a tropical depression, the standby signal number 1 will be issued. The forecast predicts showers, thunderstorms, and squalls in the region on Friday and Saturday, with strengthening offshore winds over Hong Kong. CBC: in a landmark subversion trial, 14 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists were convicted, while 2 were acquitted on Thursday. This trial, the city's largest against the democratic opposition, is seen by critics as a blow to Hong Kong's rule of law and its status as a global financial hub. The verdicts come over 3 years after police arrested 47 Democrats in mass dawn raids. The convicted face sentences ranging from 3 years to life under a China-imposed national security law. The trial has been criticized by the U.S. and other countries as politically motivated. Security was tied around the High Court, with diplomats from the U.S., Britain, and Europe attending the proceedings, and supporters queuing overnight to witness the historic moment. Nikkei Asia: a Hong Kong court found 14 of 16 defendants guilty in the city's largest national security case, part of the group known as the Hong Kong 47. The defendants, mostly prominent pro-democracy activists, were charged with conspiracy to commit subversion under a stringent national security law imposed by Beijing. The trial, seen as a landmark case, has drawn significant international attention, with diplomats from the US, Britain, and Europe present at the proceedings. Several dozen citizens gathered early to show support for the defendants, some of whom have been in custody for over 3 years. The prosecution described the unofficial primaries held by the defendants as a vicious plot to destabilize the city's governance. The trial's outcome is expected to have profound implications for Hong Kong's legal landscape and its democratic movement. South China Morning Post. The Sydney Morning Herald: Gordon Ng, an Australian Hong Kong dual citizen, has been convicted by a Hong Kong court on national security charges along with 13 other pro-democracy activists. This marks the largest national security case under a law imposed by Beijing, which has significantly curtailed public dissent in the city. Ng, a former student of Waverley College in Sydney, has been detained since 2021 and faces a potential life sentence. Among the convicted are former legislators Leung Kwok Hung, Lam Chuk Ting, Helena Wong, and Raymond Chan. The case, overseen by government-approved judges, also saw the acquittal of 2 former district councillors. The activists were prosecuted for their involvement in an unofficial primary election, accused of attempting to paralyze the government and topple the city's leader by securing a legislative majority to veto budgets. Observers view the case as an example of how the security law is used to suppress political opposition following the 2019 anti-government protests. Despite assurances from Beijing and Hong Kong that the law has restored stability and preserved judicial independence, many activists have been arrested, silenced, or forced into exile. The primary election, which drew an unexpectedly high turnout, was intended to shortlist pro-democracy candidates for the official legislative election, which was later postponed and overhauled to favor pro-Beijing politicians. The security law criminalizes secession, subversion, and collusion with foreign forces, among other offenses. South China Morning Post. Chinese developer Logan Group is at a critical juncture in its $8 billion offshore restructuring, with just 3 months to either pay or refinance a loan or risk losing control of a key luxury home project in Hong Kong. The $10.2 billion Hong Kong dollars, $1.3 billion syndicated loan supports the Corniche development, and failure to address it could jeopardize Logan's entire restructuring plan. Despite engaging J.P. Morgan Chase to arrange refinancing, a deal has yet to be finalized. This situation underscores the difficulties in restructuring within China's real estate sector, even as recent policy measures aim to alleviate some distress. Valuable offshore assets are limited, leading to intense competition among stakeholders. Logan's restructuring plan, which took nearly 2 years to negotiate, involves $3.4 billion in publicly issued dollar bonds, $3.3 billion in private debt, and a $1.3 billion shareholder loan. However, the Corniche loan is not part of this restructuring. Logan has delayed a voting deadline on suspending repayment for some yuan bonds, adding to the complexities. Its dollar bonds have been declining, contrasting with gains in other property securities following recent policy support. The company has faced previous challenges, including a liquidation petition from bondholders, which was ultimately dismissed by a Hong Kong court, giving Logan more time to manage its financial obligations. South China Morning Post. Chinese listed companies are accelerating efforts to buy back shares and increase dividends, responding to regulatory calls reminiscent of reforms in Japan and South Korea. Despite a decline in combined profits, firms announced record cash dividends totaling 2.2 trillion yuan, $300 billion for 2023. More than 100 companies returned money to investors for the first time, and many unveiled share buyback schemes to avoid delisting or other penalties. These measures have led to a nearly 17% rise in the CSI 300 index from February's 5-year lows. However, skepticism remains among fund managers who see these efforts as market rescue rather than genuine corporate governance improvements. State-controlled companies, which make up about 30% of market capitalization in China and Hong Kong, face potential conflicts of interest with non-state shareholders. While Japan's reforms have led to unwinding strategic shareholdings, China's focus on returning money to investors is seen as a temporary fix. Fund managers like Yang Tingwu and John Pinkel note that while these moves are positive, significant improvements in corporate governance are still needed. Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Australia's Wagyu beef industry, initially focused on Asian markets, is now making significant inroads into the American market. Australian Wagyu, known for its high-quality marbling, is fetching up to $450 per kilogram and is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. South Australia's Mayura station, which started with 25 Wagyu cattle in 1998, now has around 10,000 and recently began exporting to high-end restaurants in Los Angeles and Las Vegas. Stone Axe Pastoral Company, another major producer, has also seen excellent growth in the U.S. market. American restaurants are adding their own flair to the product, with some offering a $1,500 Australian Wagyu tomahawk steak presented with a laser light show. A study co-funded by the Australian Wagyu Association predicts the $2 billion American Wagyu market will grow by 7% annually, making it a critical market for Australian producers. Australia's prominence in Wagyu production is attributed to its early adoption of Wagyu genetics and the ability to export to over 50 countries. Bloomberg, a Hong Kong court found 14 opposition figures guilty in the city's largest national security trial, targeting pro-democracy activists under a 2020 law imposed by Beijing. The defendants, including prominent figures like Joshua Wong and Claudia Mo, were accused of subversion for holding unofficial primary elections aimed at securing a legislative majority to challenge the city's leadership. The trial, seen as a crackdown on political dissent, resulted in most defendants being denied bail and facing life imprisonment. The verdicts were delivered by judges selected by the city's former leader, reflecting the government's determination to suppress political opposition. The trial was closely watched, with diplomats from the EU, France, and the US among the observers. The rulings come as Hong Kong authorities continue to enforce the national security law, with at least 299 arrests and 159 charges since July 2020. The severity of the sentences will likely demonstrate the pressure on courts to align with the government's stance on national security. The Toronto Star, Hong Kong, AP, in a landmark case, some of Hong Kong's most prominent pro-democracy activists face potential life sentences under a national security law imposed by Beijing. The 16 defendants, part of a group of 47 prosecuted for their involvement in an unofficial primary election, are accused of attempting to paralyze the government and overthrow the city's leader by securing a legislative majority to veto budgets. This case highlights the use of the security law to stifle political opposition after the massive 2019 protests. Despite Beijing's promise to maintain Hong Kong's Western-style civil liberties for 50 years post-1997 handover, the 2020 law has significantly curtailed free speech and assembly. Among the accused are legal scholar Benny Tai, former student leader Joshua Wong, and ex-lawmakers like Leung Kwok-hung and Claudia Mo. 31 have pleaded guilty, hoping for shorter sentences, while the remaining 16, who pleaded not guilty, are set for a 2-day hearing starting Thursday. Supporters, including social worker Stanley Chong and SL Chiu, gathered early to show solidarity, with some arriving the previous night. Associated Press, Hong Kong, AP, on Thursday, a Hong Kong court convicted 14 pro-democracy activists, including former lawmakers Leung Kwok-hung, Lam Chuk-ting, Helena Wong, and Raymond Chan, in the city's largest national security case. The judges, however, acquitted former district councillors Li Yueshun and Lawrence Lau. The convicted face potential life imprisonment under charges of subversion for their roles in an unofficial primary election aimed at securing a legislative majority to veto government budgets. This case underscores the national security law's role in suppressing political dissent post-2019 protests. Despite Beijing's assurances of judicial independence and restored stability, the law has drastically limited free speech and assembly. The prosecution involves a diverse group of activists, including Benny Tai and Joshua Wong. 31 have pleaded guilty, while the remaining 16, who faced a non-jury trial, awaited their verdicts amidst a large turnout of supporters. Social worker Stanley Chong and SL Chiu expressed their support, with Chiu collecting messages for the activists. The primary election, which had a significant turnout, was intended to push for democratic reforms but was criticized by Beijing as a security threat. Japan Times, Hong Kong, on Thursday morning, a Hong Kong court will deliver verdicts in the city's largest case against pro-democracy campaigners since the imposition of a national security law by China. The 47 defendants face life imprisonment on subversion charges, with 3 high court judges expected to take up to 2 days to announce their decisions. By 6 a.m., a queue of about 24 people had formed outside the court building, some having waited overnight to attend the hearing. This case marks a significant moment in Hong Kong's political landscape, illustrating the national security law's impact on curbing dissent and the broader implications for the city's democratic aspirations. The primary election, which saw a high voter turnout, aimed to secure a legislative majority to push for democratic reforms, but it was ultimately deemed a challenge to the security law by Beijing. South China Morning Post, Siobhan Haughey continued to dominate the Mare Nostrum swim tour, securing her 4th consecutive gold medal in the 100-meter freestyle at the second leg in Barcelona with a time of 52.76 seconds. Despite being slower than her previous 52.55 seconds in France, Haughey led the race from start to finish, outpacing Sweden's Michelle Coleman and Slovenia's Neza Klankar. Haughey's teammate, Ian Ho-Yen too, failed to replicate his bronze-winning performance in France, finishing sixth in the 50-meter freestyle. The only other Hong Kong swimmer in the A finals, Adam Chillingworth, placed fifth in the 200-meter breaststroke. The Mare Nostrum Tour continues in Barcelona before concluding in Monaco, offering one of the final chances for swimmers to qualify for the Paris Olympics. South China Morning Post, Financial Secretary Paul Chan Imopa emphasized the importance of open dialogue between China and the U.S., highlighting Hong Kong's pivotal role in fostering cooperation between the Greater Bay Area and the San Francisco Bay Area. Speaking at a high-level dialogue in Berkeley, California, Chan announced the signing of 6 agreements aimed at enhancing climate and trade exchanges. The deals include partnerships between the California-China Climate Institute and Hong Kong's Financial Services and Treasury Bureau, and the University of Hong Kong's Institute for Climate and Carbon Neutrality. Guangdong Governor Wang Weizhong also identified areas for collaboration, such as education, technology, and tourism. The dialogue, part of broader U.S.-China climate talks, underscored the necessity of continued cooperation to address global challenges like climate change, despite geopolitical tensions. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.